The Montana sun was just starting to dip behind the Absarokas, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple when those red and blues lit up my rear view. I eased my old Ford pickup onto the gravel shoulder of the lonely road outside Livingston, the dust cloud catching up to us. I watched in the side mirror as the patrol car door opened. The officer who stepped out wasn't much older than a boy, really. Sharp uniform, mirrored aviators, a walk that was all swagger. He came up to my window and I rolled it down, the dry mountain air rushing in. "License and registration," he said. No sir, no hello, just a flat, demanding tone. "Afternoon, officer," I said, reaching slowly for my wallet in the back pocket of my worn jeans. My hands, speckled with age and old scars, fumbled a bit with the leather. I've never been fast with these things. "The registration's in the glove box," I said, handing over my Montana driver's license. The photo was from a decade ago when my hair was more gray than white. The officer, his nameplate read Travis, snatched the license from my fingers. He didn't look at it. He looked at me, his eyes hidden behind those mirrors, sweeping over my flannel shirt, my face. "You know why I pulled you over, sir?" he asked, putting a nasty, condescending emphasis on the word. "I can't say I do, son. I was doing the limit." "Your left tail light is out," he stated, though it sounded more like an accusation. "Vehicle in this condition is a hazard. Where are you headed in such a hurry?" I wasn't in a hurry. I was just going home. Just back to my place, up the canyon. "Uh-huh." He finally glanced at my license, then back at me. "Wyatt, this your current address? This vehicle insured?" Every question was a little hammer tap, dismissive and sharp. He acted like he'd caught a cartel kingpin, not a 72-year-old man in a pickup truck. He leaned down, resting his forearms on my doorframe, invading the space of my cab. "You live out here all alone, do you, Wyatt? Seems quiet for an old-timer. You sure you're feeling all right to drive? Your reflexes might not be what they used to be." The condescension was so thick you could spread it on toast. He was talking to me like I was a child or someone who'd lost their marbles. I just kept my eyes forward, on the winding road ahead, my hands resting on the steering wheel. I said nothing. I'd met men like Travis before. Men who thought the badge and the gun and the youth made them kings of their little stretch of asphalt. The setting sun glinted off his sunglasses, and for a second all I could see was my own reflection. An old man in a stopped truck, waiting for a boy in a uniform to decide his evening. The wind off the Yellowstone has a way of carving through silence. It's what I hear most days, out here. That, and the soft snoring of my old dog Boone, stretched out on the porch planks. This cabin isn't much, just timber and peace, but it's mine. It's the kind of quiet I fought for, the kind you have to earn. Most folks in town think I'm just the quiet guy who lives by the river. They see me come in for supplies, give a nod, and that's the extent of it. And that's how I like it. My history isn't something you hang on a wall, it's locked away, a series of doors I sealed shut a long time ago. The uniform, the deployments, the things I saw and did, they live in a different country, far from this Montana dirt. My only real tether to the world is Silas. He runs the hardware store in town, a place that smells of cut lumber and engine oil. He doesn't ask questions. He knows better. He'll just slide a box of .30-06 cartridges across the counter to me, or help me pick out a new hinge for the shed door that's warping in the damp. Our conversations are about the river level, or the forecast for snow, or the best bait for trout this time of year. It's a language of simple, solid things. He's a good man. He sees the walls I've built, and instead of trying to scale them, he just passes a tool through the gap. Sometimes, when I'm splitting wood out back, the rhythm of the axe takes me away. The thwack of the blade biting into pine becomes another rhythm from another life. The smell of cordite instead of sap. The feeling of a different weight in my hands. I'd stop, lean on the axe handle, and just breathe until the Yellowstone air washed it all clean again. This solitude, it's not loneliness, it's a choice. Every creak of this cabin, every ripple on the river, every mile of empty forest around me, it's a buffer, a guard post. Out here, the past can't sneak up on you, or so I told myself. I had Boone, I had my routines, I had the deep, enduring quiet. It was enough. It had to be. Because the man I was before this cabin, the one with the secrets etched not just in his memory but on his skin, the one with the Spetsnaz tattoo, that man needed to stay buried. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the old Ford's cab, the door groaning on its hinges. The New Mexico sun was a brutal white coin in a washed-out sky, baking the two-lane blacktop and the scent of hot asphalt and sagebrush into the air. Deputy Travis stood a few feet away, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting a distorted, tiny version of me and my beat-up truck. I could see the frustration tightening the line of his jaw. I hadn't said a word beyond yes, sir, and no, sir, since his lights had flashed in my rear view 10 minutes ago. My silence, my calm, it was sand in his gears. License and registration were clean, but I don't like your attitude, son, Travis said, his voice a low simmer. Makes me think you've got something to hide. I'm writing you up for the cracked taillight, the expired inspection sticker I'm going to say I found, and for failure to signal a lane change back there. I just nodded slowly, my hands held loosely at my sides. The less I gave him, the sooner this would be over. Or so I thought. He took a step closer, his utility belt creaking. Turn around. Place your hands on the hood of your vehicle. A pat-down? I asked, my voice flat. On what grounds, Deputy? On the grounds of suspicious behavior and non-compliance, he snapped, the professional veneer cracking. You're being awful quiet for an innocent man. Now turn around. I complied, turning to face the sun-warmed, peeling blue paint of my truck's hood. I spread my fingers on the metal, feeling the heat seep into my palms. I heard his footsteps approach from behind, deliberate and heavy. His hands were impersonal and rough, starting at my ankles, moving up my jeans. The procedure was standard, but his tension radiated off him like heat shimmer. He was looking for a reaction, a flinch, a protest, anything to justify the anger I could feel rolling off him. He moved up to my waist, patting down my pockets, then to my torso. As his hands patted over the back of my simple T-shirt, they paused for a fraction of a second over my left shoulder blade. He knew what was under the cotton, the Spetsnaz tattoo, the black ink wings and star I'd gotten a lifetime ago, in a different world. He didn't say anything, but the pause was its own kind of question, a silent, "What are you?" He finished the pat-down and stepped back. "All right, you can turn around." I did, meeting my own hollow-eyed reflection in his sunglasses. He was staring hard, as if trying to decipher a code written on my face. The tickets were the least of it now. He'd felt the tattoo, and in his mind, that changed everything. The quiet man in the old truck was no longer just a traffic stop. I was a puzzle, and one he was determined to solve, by the book or otherwise. The real trouble, I knew, was just beginning. I leaned against the driver's side door of my old Ford, the sun-warmed metal a familiar comfort against my back. The air in the dusty parking lot was thick, and not just with the late afternoon heat. Travis was still talking. His voice, that same smug drawl I'd heard echoing in my head for years, was painting a picture for anyone who might be listening. "Just can't seem to put down roots, can you, Wyatt?" he said, circling like a vulture. He gestured with his chin toward my truck. "This thing looks like it's one pothole away from donating its parts to science. Fitting, I guess. Always were a drifter. The kind of trouble that just blows into town, stirs up the dust, and blows right back out." I let the words hang there. I didn't look at him. Instead, I focused on the distant line of pine trees at the edge of the lot, their shadows growing long. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest, not from fear, but from a cold, focusing concentration. This was the game. He wanted a reaction, a clenched fist, a sharp retort, anything to prove his point. So I gave him a movement, but not the one he wanted. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted my left arm. I kept my gaze forward, my expression blank, as if his words were nothing more than the buzz of a fly. My right hand went to the cuff of my worn flannel shirt. I began to roll up the sleeve, the fabric whispering against itself. It was a methodical, controlled action. An inch, then another, folding the plaid neatly upon itself. I was adjusting my watch, a simple, mundane task. But the reveal was the point. As the sleeve rose past my forearm, the ink came into view. It wasn't the blurry, homemade tattoo Travis probably expected from a drifter. This was stark, precise, and brutal in its artistry. The Spetsnaz tattoo. The symbols and lines were a language of their own, speaking of a world of ice and endurance, of a brotherhood forged in extremes Travis couldn't even fathom. The black ink stood out sharply against my skin, a silent, permanent record. I didn't flash it at him. I didn't make a show of it. I just let it be there, exposed by the casual act of checking the time, a truth etched into my flesh that contradicted every lazy assumption he was making. The truck might look like trouble, but this tattoo was a history. It was my anchor, not his weapon. I finally glanced down, securing the watch band, letting the sight of that ink hang in the space between us as my only reply. I was trying to keep my cool. I really was. Silas was doing most of the talking, laying out the facts about the missing shipment in that calm, methodical way of his. Travis was leaning against his desk, that smug, untouchable look on his face, just drinking it in. Then, as I shifted my weight, the cuff of my flannel shirt rode up my forearm. It was just a few inches of skin, but it was enough. I saw Travis's eyes flicker down. The condescending smirk on his face froze, then just dissolved. It was like watching a mask crack. His gaze locked onto my arm, and he pushed himself off the desk, taking one slow, deliberate step closer. The room, which had been filled with the low hum of Silas's voice, went silent. "What's that?" Travis asked, but his tone wasn't demanding anymore. It was curious, wary. I didn't move. I just let him look. He squinted, his head tilting slightly as he tried to decipher the old faded black ink. The Cyrillic script, the specific brutal lines of the dagger and wings, it wasn't something you saw in this part of the world. not unless you knew what you were looking at. The fabric of my sleeve was only partially hiding it, teasing the history etched there. I could feel Silas go still beside me. He knew the story, but he'd never seen Travis react to anything like this. Travis's arrogance was his armor, and right now, I watched a chink appear in it. He wasn't seeing Wyatt, the local guy, asking inconvenient questions. For that one, stretched out second, he was seeing something else entirely. Something that didn't fit into his neat little kingdom of fear and intimidation. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, his eyes tracing the symbols. The Spetsnaz tattoo, a souvenir from a life I'd tried to leave buried. It was supposed to be a reminder for me, a private one. I never thought it would become a key, a silent warning, in a dusty office a world away from where I got it. He finally looked up, meeting my eyes. The cocky assurance was gone, replaced by a sharp, recalculating scrutiny. He didn't say another word about it. He just took a step back, the gears turning behind his eyes. The dynamic in the room had shifted. He wasn't just pushing us around anymore. He was wondering for the first time just who he was pushing. The air in the bar was already thick, but the moment my eyes locked with Travis's, it turned to stone. I could see the challenge still burning in his gaze, the same arrogant fire that had started all of this. He thought he knew me. He thought he'd pegged me as just another guy he could push around. My heart was a hammer against my ribs, but my hand was steady. Without breaking that stare, I reached down with my left hand and took the cuff of my right sleeve. I began to roll it up slowly, the coarse fabric folding over itself. First past my wrist, then my forearm. I saw his eyes flicker down, then back to mine, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought it was a joke. I kept rolling. Past the midpoint of my forearm, the old faded black ink began to show. The smirk on Travis's face froze. I rolled it further, up past my elbow, until the sleeve was a tight bundle at my bicep. And there it was, exposed to the stale bar light and his disbelieving eyes. The complete SPN tattoo. The noise of the bar, the clinking glasses, the low hum of talk, the classic rock on the jukebox, it all just vanished. It was like someone had hit mute on the world. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears. I watched his face. I saw the recognition hit him, not as a casual thought, but as a physical blow. All the color, all that arrogant bluster, just drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin a sickly, waxy pale. His jaw went slack. His eyes, wide now, weren't looking at me anymore. They were fixed on the tattoo, reading the story etched into my skin that I never, ever talked about. He knew. His own military training, the source of so much of his pride, instantly decoded the insignia. This wasn't some generic tribal design or a unit patch from a stateside base. This was Spetsnaz. The letters SPN might as well have been a warning label in a language only people like him and me could truly read. It spoke of a different kind of training, a different kind of cold, and operations no one ever bragged about in a place like this. The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. His two buddies, who'd been posturing behind him, fell completely still, sensing the seismic shift but not understanding why. Travis's bravado had evaporated, replaced by a raw, stunned fear. He was no longer looking at Wyatt, the quiet guy at the end of the bar. He was looking at a ghost from a chapter of my life I'd tried to bury, and in that moment, He understood exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. The air in the little station went dead still. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent light overhead, buzzing like a trapped insect. I looked at Travis, this kid playing cop in a town where nothing ever happens. I saw the cheap, polished badge on his chest, the way his hand still hovered near his hip, the arrogant set of his jaw that hadn't yet been broken by real life. He'd made his judgment. He'd seen an old man in worn clothes and decided he was just another piece of the scenery to be moved aside. So I stopped being that old man. It wasn't a dramatic movement. I didn't snarl or ball my fists. It was a subtle, total reconstruction of myself right in front of him. My shoulders, which had been slightly slumped from the long drive, squared back, not with stiffness, but with an easy, balanced readiness. The mild, tired look in my eyes evaporated, replaced by a flat, patient focus that fixed on him and didn't waver. I let my hands hang loose at my sides, completely relaxed, yet somehow suggesting a terrifying potential for speed. I didn't say a word. Speaking would have given him a thread to grab onto, an argument to have. This was simpler. This was just truth, communicated in silence. I saw the change in his face. The smug certainty first faltered, then began to crumble. His eyes, which had been scanning me with dismissive efficiency, now darted from my eyes to my posture to my hands and back. He was looking for the old man he'd cuffed, and he couldn't find him anymore. In his place was something else, something that didn't belong in his tidy, small-town world of stolen bicycles and bar fights. His gaze snagged on my left forearm, where the sleeve of my shirt had ridden up just enough. The black, stark lines of the Spetsnaz tattoo weren't fully visible, but the edge of it was. A dark, intricate hint of a history written in ink and blood. It was the key object in the room now, more powerful than his badge or his gun. Travis's breath hitched, just slightly. The color drained from his knuckles where he gripped his clipboard. He was no longer confronting a suspect. He was standing before a verdict, and the verdict was his own monumental error. The silence I held became a mirror, and in it, he was suddenly, terribly aware of just how deep the water was that he'd so casually decided to wade into. I just waited, letting the weight of that realization settle on him all by itself. The Montana air was so still, I could hear the distant cry of a hawk. It was just me, Silas, leaning against the truck with his arms crossed, and Travis, who'd been all bluster and threat just moments ago. Now he looked like he'd seen a ghost. My sleeve was still pushed up. The black ink of the Spetsnaz tattoo, that stark, brutal insignia from a life I'd tried to bury, was exposed to the pale afternoon sun. I watched Travis's eyes lock onto it. His face, red with anger seconds before, drained of all color. His jaw went slack. Then something happened I never could have predicted. His spine straightened, his shoulders snapped back, and his right hand came up in a razor-sharp, perfect military salute. He held it there, frozen in the quiet, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the prairie grass. It felt like an eternity. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his hand. The arrogant rancher was gone, replaced by a man who looked profoundly, deeply ashamed. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Sir," he stammered, the word thick in his throat. He cleared it, tried again, his voice low and formal. "Sir, I had no idea." He finally looked at me, and the respect in his gaze was so stark, it was uncomfortable. This wasn't the false respect of fear. This was the recognition of a shared language, one of service and sacrifice that transcended our petty roadside argument. "My apologies," he said, the words heartfelt and heavy. "Veteran." That last word did it. It wasn't just an acknowledgement of the tattoo, it was an acknowledgement of everything it meant. The years, the pain, the things you carry that nobody else can see. He wasn't apologizing for blocking the road anymore. He was apologizing for every assumption, every challenge, every bit of disrespect he'd thrown my way since we got here. I just gave him a single slow nod. No words were needed. The confrontation was over, dissolved not by fists or threats, but by a silent understanding etched in ink. I rolled my sleeve back down, the fabric covering the past once more. The hawk cried again, farther away now, as Travis turned without another word and walked back to his truck, a much smaller man than the one who had stepped out of it. The air in that dusty parking lot felt different now. It wasn't the heavy, threatening heat from before. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed. I just stood there, my heart still hammering against my ribs, watching as the man who'd wanted to break me just minutes ago completely fell apart. Travis wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders, which had been squared up like a bull's, were slumped. All that arrogant bluster, all that venomous prejudice he'd worn like armor, just evaporated. It didn't crack. It dissolved. He looked at the ground, then slowly, with a hand that wasn't quite steady, he reached into his back pocket. He pulled out my folded documents, my passport, my papers. He didn't toss them. He didn't shove them at my chest. He held them out, an offering. "Here," he said, and his voice was hollow, stripped bare. It wasn't the growl of a predator anymore. It was the defeated murmur of a man who'd just seen his entire worldview proven wrong. I took them from him, the paper warm from his pocket. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The proof was right there on my forearm for the whole world, and especially for him to see. Then he did the last thing I ever expected. He took a hesitant step toward my truck. Let me help you back in," he mumbled, gesturing weakly toward the driver's side door I'd been yanked out of. It wasn't a command. It was a plea, a final, tangible act of surrender, an attempt to undo the physical aggression with a gesture of aid. His demeanor was one of profound, gut-wrenching remorse. The villain wasn't just defeated. He was dismantled, piece by ugly piece, by the very symbol he thought he understood. I didn't need his help. My legs were working fine, but in that moment I understood that this wasn't about me needing assistance. This was his penance. So I gave a single, slow nod. I walked to the truck, and he shuffled alongside me, a shadow of his former self. He didn't touch me. He just put his hand on the doorframe, a silent, respectful hold as I climbed back into the seat I owned. I looked down at him from the cab. The man who called me a liar, a thief, a disgrace. Now he just looked small and terribly, terribly lost. The Spetsnaz tattoo hadn't won a fight. It had ended one before a single punch was ever thrown. I started the engine, the sound breaking the silence. He took a step back, his head still bowed. I didn't look in the rear view as I pulled away. I just drove, leaving the shell of Travis's arrogance in a cloud of respectful dust. The gravel crunched one last time under my tires as I turned onto the blacktop, leaving the dust of that lonely county road behind me in the rear view. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel Travis standing there by his patrol car, watching my old pickup disappear. The heat of the confrontation was gone, replaced by the cool, quiet understanding that settles after a storm. The incident was closed. The drive home was a meditation. Pine trees blurred into a green wall, and the mountains rose up to meet the sky, solid and unchanging. My hands were steady on the wheel. There was no tremor, no leftover adrenaline, just the deep, familiar calm of my own thoughts. He'd seen the mark. He'd recognized the truth in it, a truth louder than any shout or threat could ever be. Some battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with silence, and with the unshakable weight of a mark of honor. An hour later, I killed the engine in front of my cabin. The silence here was different. It was mine. It was welcoming. I stepped out, the wooden porch groaning its familiar greeting under my boots. Inside, the familiar smells of old pine and coffee grounds wrapped around me. I shrugged off my jacket and hung it on the peg by the door. Moving to the sink, I poured a glass of water and looked out the window at the darkening forest. My reflection in the glass was faint, just an outline of an old man with a weary face. The world looks at me and sees just that, an old man. They see the slow walk, the quiet life, the history they assume is simple. But I know, and now, in his way, Travis knows my service, my brothers, the things I carried and the things I let go. It's all still there. Not in stories I tell, but in the lines on my face and the quiet in my eyes. It's etched here in the faded black ink on my skin that told a story Travis finally learned how to read, and it's etched deeper in my soul, a permanent, silent testament. I took a long drink of water. The cabin was still. The forest outside was still, and for the first time in a very long time, so was I, completely, and finally, at peace. The lesson was given. The road was clear ahead.